Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for GWBC Radio's Open for Business. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of GWBC Open for Business. And today's guest is Chef Maria Kemp with Beyond Decadence. Welcome, Chef.
Well, thank you. I love the emphasis you put on chef. That was very cool.
Well, that's it. I'm a big fan of chefs, so I want to give you your due.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about Beyond Decadence. How are you serving folks?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, Beyond Decadence started as a dessert catering company. And then in 2020, when the world blew up or imploded, the most common word was the word pivot, but I adapted the word morphed because I thought pivot was so overused. So I morphed the business to focus on providing services in the form of DEI&B, which stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging training and team building activities for corporations.
So have you always been a chef? Has this been a lifelong pursuit, or is this also a morph?
I love that. You're using my word already. No, I didn't start as a chef. Actually, I spent about 20 plus years. I usually round up and say 1 million in the IT world. And then when I was becoming an empty nester, it was time to make a transition and to follow my passion. And I enrolled at the French Pastry School in Chicago and left IT behind.
So what was that like, that transition to go from corporate, which I would imagine has a lot of rules and a certain lifestyle, to chef, which is a different set of rules and a different lifestyle?
Right. It was a huge transition because I had spent, 25 years working as a consultant for Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies as a senior IT consultant. So you go from all that structure and rigor and processes and procedures, being a contractor, but also working for some really large corporations, to now you're in your student uniform. It wasn't called your chef whites, yet at that point, and learning all the ins and outs, do's and don'ts about becoming a pastry professional. So you go from I wasn't in the boardroom, but you can almost say like the boardroom to the kitchen. So it was totally different.
Now, what drew you to pastry? Was that something you were always doing on the side? That was like kind of one of your own passions for yourself throughout your life, yeah. And you said you want to go all in, or what attracted you to that industry?
Yeah, I don't think I was much different than most little girls. I started in the kitchen with my mom, as a kid, learning how to bake and, lick the beater and, you're going to get salmonella, there's raw eggs and that. And I'm still here today. And, spending all that time in the IT world, and then just, being at a point in my career where I was becoming an empty nester and could pursue something I was passionate about instead of being, as focused on, providing for my daughter. And it was a huge transition, but I had always loved to bake. And I had actually baked, as we call it, on the side just for fun and hobbies all through that time. I was an IT consultant, and it's like, wow, I really love this. But, I needed to stay the course to provide for my daughter as a single parent the best way that I could. And contracting was the best way to do that in the IT industry.
Now, were you afraid that transitioning from a love of something so much to a profession of that same thing was going to, maybe make you not love it as much? Because a lot of times the business stuff isn't the fun part. The baking is the fun part and the creating is the fun part, but running a business around it isn't as fun.
Oh, I love how you delicately put that. It's the best way to kill a hobby is to turn it into a business. And yeah, at first I wasn't as worried about that. But then when I got into it and saw there was so much more than just, baking an occasional pie or cake or cookies or cheesecake and taking it into the office. Now, I'm providing customer service. I'm dealing with deadlines and trying to get customers to adhere to deadlines, especially in holiday seasons. And then all the back end, business part of it, going out, finding customers and courting them and wooing them and pricing, and just all the ins and outs that, you don't have to deal with when you're doing it as a hobby become front and center when you're an entrepreneur and it's now your livelihood.
So going through that, did you have any experiences that were like, okay, I can do this? Or were there some kind of epiphany moments where you're like, okay, this is the right path for me to go on?
I knew it was the right path for me to go on, but I learned a lot. And the best way to learn what to do and what not to do is just to dive in and do it, because you can either jump into something and, I believe with my faith, God will either bless it or correct it, but you have to make a step and take an action with the information that you have at the time, the best possible choice. So I had lots of gotcha moments. Some were good and some were not, but I can see now that I'm many years past that initial bakery, how those became woven into the fabric of who I am and have absolutely bailed me out and saved me in situations I face, now in my business in general.
So how has wearing that IT hat for so long impacted your your pastry business? Is that where this emphasis in the DEI&B came in, where you're trying to kind of morph those two careers together somewhat?
Well, the IT background saves me every day because I'm very comfortable, doing a lot of the technical things behind the scenes that, other entrepreneurs, may not be, because I spent so many years in that. But the DEI&B came in through, actually, it began with the request of a client at the time. I always have to stop back and remember where it started, where they said, we really want to work with you this year as a pastry chef, and we're doing this celebration for Juneteenth, and we would love it if you could figure out a way to bring in, the desserts into our Juneteenth celebration and kind of give us a history lesson too. And so that's where it started. And then it grew from there as I had my ear to what was going on in society, in the business world, where diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging were starting to come to the foreground. I said, okay, you know what? I'm kind of tired of baking for production and doing catering and dealing with orders. So the first customer had this idea. I think I can take it even further. And I walked away from the catering side onto the services side, and it's been really a rewarding experience.
Well, you must have been doing something, though, for them to even approach you about this. Was there something that you were doing that was attracting that type of a client to you?
I believe it started. I'm going back because that's back a few years now. I was starting to do the team building when the pandemic hit, and I was aiming those. At first, I was doing private baking experiences virtually online to the general public. And then when I got certified through an organization, I started offering it to corporate clients for team building. And then that particular client latched on to, you're a little bit out of the box thinker, a divergent thinker, and we want to think divergently and do something a little different this year. And it was just a marriage that came together and didn't end in divorce.
So what do those conversations look like when you're explaining to your clients that we're going to take pastry and baking, and then we're going to combine them with DEI&B, and this is what the outcome will be when when I hand this over to you or we do this together?
Right. First, it's a little bit of confusion. It's, what my daughter and I call the puppy dog head tilt, where they tilt their head and they're kind of like,
interesting.
They're like, are we going to bake something? Are we going to cook something? Are you a French-trained pastry chef or a DEI trainer?
Or both.
And there's all the confusion, like, how are you going to merge the two together? But I just did it for the BMW Supplier Diversity Exchange. They hold that every year. This was year 11, and I was a breakout session speaker. So it was the first time I got to do the full program where it's very interactive, and people were confused walking in. They weren't sure, but they knew there was going to be dessert. So that was enough to lure some in. It's all part of my master plan. But when they went through the session, then they got it. They understood it. So basically what it involves is, I call it a dessert presentation, interactive dessert presentation, to help bring new understanding to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because I found when I use the word baking, then people think we're going to bake, we're in a kitchen, and they're trying to wrap their head around it. Their brain is going down a rabbit hole trying to figure out how are you going to do that. They're looking at my chef jacket, and then they're not dialing into how it's actually going to take place. So I start calling it a dessert presentation, where I use the desserts to help bring that new understanding. And people still are a little bit confused because it sounds like a Shark Tank idea, but no one's ever done this before. And there's not anybody doing it in the marketplace. So it is new, and it is, very hard for people to figure out how are you going to do that. But you can show diversity, equity versus equality, inclusion versus exclusion, belonging versus not belonging through desserts, and make that an interactive experience. Because when you bring food into it, adults are just as excited as a kid getting a lollipop or a balloon. They're like, dessert? What are we going to eat? And very involved and engaged and interactive and enthusiastic and focused on what's going on. What am I going to get? Did they get more than I did? What did they get? And it helps the concept resonate, because I can show all of those aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging through desserts. And that's what no one is doing.
Now, can you share how that occurs, like in the session, or is that some proprietary methodology you only reveal at sessions?
I'll share a little snippet. How about that?
All right. I don't want to give it away, but I also want to make people understand that this is a different way to achieve the same outcome.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a video clip, which I'm going to be sharing on LinkedIn, which shows part of the session, the same one I'm going to share with you, because people do need to see it or they don't understand it. For diversity, for example, you can show diversity. If I give a group desserts, maybe they don't all have the same dessert. They don't all have the same flavor. They may have different amounts of desserts. They may have different tools to eat that dessert with. And you might think, well, that's kind of simplistic. Well, no, not really, because think about when you're putting food in front of people and a luscious dessert, they're looking around to see, oh, what did you get? Oh, you got more than I did. It's a very simple way. That's just the diversity piece. There's still the other pieces, the E, the I, and the B, that can be done with as well. And let me tell you, food resonates. Don't we all fall asleep watching the Food Network most nights, or the Greatest British Baking Show? So when you put dessert in the hands of individuals and then start bringing the concept and the definition together with it, it starts to take on more meaning, because then they start to experience what individuals may feel like based on work situations, teams, departments, and what's happening in those areas. And diversity, it's just a tip. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
And that's something that people learn better when they connect the dots themselves, and you're having breadcrumbs lead them to a place, but they have to connect the dots, and they're seeing it, and that'll help them get that aha, oh, I get it now, where it resonates and it kind of sinks in a little bit more, I think, than as opposed to being told.
Exactly. And that's what was so rewarding after spending 4 months putting together this presentation and mapping out and planning. There's that IT background coming in for detail, of mapping it all out, of the flow and how everything had to work together so it was seamless and the message was understood, and watching those light bulbs go on above people's head, like, oh my goodness, I get it. I understand it. Now I know how it feels. And that didn't feel good, and we felt bad for them, and we were going to do, and hearing the conversations that resulted was just amazing. And, in the presentation, I had what I called a 3-ingredient recipe or 3-ingredient approach, where I started with dictionary definitions, because there's so much misunderstanding or lack of understanding of what diversity is, what equity is, what inclusion is, what belonging is. People think they know, but they don't always know. And sometimes they're afraid to say that they don't know, because we're all supposed to get it. But it is very confusing. So I started with the definitions, and did the audience participation section, which is what I just explained about, distributing the desserts, and then wrapped up with a little short baking demonstration to help further illustrate why it's so important and why you have to do things correctly in order to reap the benefits of a diverse and inclusive workforce, and the benefit actually that it has to the corporation. And there's real dollars and cents behind that.
Now, who have you determined who that ideal client, that perfect fit client is for you yet?
That's a really tough question to answer, and I'm digging into that even further because as I look at the different industries that, have expressed interest or, that I'm beginning to work with and have conversations with, they don't follow any particular, industry. Like I can't say, it's all banking, it's all automotive, it's all this, it's all that, but starting to look at what are those common threads between them. It's typically going to be an organization that, has someone in a DEI leadership manager, or I can't think of the other term right now, capacity, and who's active in their efforts and is bold enough to say, what we're doing may not be working and we may need a fresh approach. And that's where the beginning of where I can come in to help them. The other common threads will start to reveal themselves as I get a little bit deeper into conversations with the corporations.
Now, is this a presentation or is it an ongoing training? Is it both, or are you still kind of figuring all that out?
No, I've got that figured out. I figured that out in the 4 months of planning. And then, when I did the 2 back-to-back sessions, at BMW, I saw very clearly then. It's kind of funny you asked that because I was having a conversation with the client about doing it for them. And we thought we could do it virtually. But then after I did it in person, I'm like, there's no way this can be virtual. It has to be in person because this isn't about, me making desserts and shipping them to someone and, telling them what to do. It's my expertise, my background, my experience, and everything that I bring into the equation that helps it be effective. But yeah, it definitely has to be in person to have that interactive experience. I like to call it an interactive dessert presentation because when I put the word dessert in there, people's ears perk up. They're like, ooh, I think I'm interested in that. Even if I'm just hungry, I'm interested, but then they get the additional benefits when they attend. So it is an interactive presentation. It's not a keynote speaking opportunity. It's not package it up and send it to them. It's not virtual. It's an interactive presentation or breakout session. And
then how many people does it work optimally for?
That can vary. Like for BMW, we planned on 100 per session because there's certain logistics that I have to make sure or are planned for in advance. And when all the planning is done, then it's easy from there. And planning is easy and a comfort area for a strength for me. So that was the easy part. But we did 100 there. Could it go a little bigger? Yeah, it definitely could. I wouldn't want to do, like 500, 600, anything like that. Maybe 150, possibly 200, but that also depends upon the venue and the space that the organization or corporation has the event taking place in as well, and the limitations that they may have on time, because the more people that you have, the more time it's probably going to take. So there's a lot of factors that would play into that. And then the people who are attending, they're going to eat something, but they're not necessarily going to make something, right? No, exactly. Thank you. Good question. No, they are going to eat it. When I tell them they can, because we have to go through, all the information and the teaching portion of it, and then then they do get to eat it, and they love that part the best. But no, they're not making anything at all. This is not. That's why I call it an interactive dessert presentation. So it doesn't, have the air that you're going to bake something, you're going to cook something, you're going to get your hands in there and, do anything to create anything. It's a presentation. And then I share the recipe for the dessert they enjoyed via my link tree after. So if they want to go home and make it, they can, but it's not in the session.
Now, what compelled you to get certified through GWBC and be a certified business owner?
Absolutely. I actually I don't remember if I contacted someone from there or one of my friends was certified through GWBC. And I was able to attend the national conference last year in, where was it? Was it Nashville?
Nashville, right.
Nashville. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I attended the conference even though I wasn't certified yet. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is phenomenal!" It's just a sea of women business owners, or businesses that are primarily, the majority of women owned, and making all the connections, going to the expo, going to the events, and just the engagement and even the webinars and seminars and all these things that they had available, I was plugging into, as I was going through certification, maybe even before I was, finally fully certified, has been phenomenal. It was another opportunity to meet other women who, are kind of pioneers like me. We're all charging for it and selling a product or a service and believe in what we do, and love finding individuals who are on that same journey and same path as we are. And it's just been phenomenal. I can't tell you how many things I've attended and the connections I've made. There were actually women that I met at an event in Charlotte, the Tables of 8 at Ally, and I wasn't even certified yet then. I got certified in July of this year, and they came to Greenville and came to my session at BMW. So that was really very cool.
Wow, that's very supportive and collaborative.
Right.
Now, if somebody wants to learn more about Beyond Decadence, what is the website? What is the best way to connect with you?
Mm-hmm. The best way to connect with me is you can always go to the website, which is beyonddecadence.com. It's the word beyond and then the word decadence, which is on the screen behind me. I'll tilt a little bit so people can see it if they're watching the video. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm all over social media, especially LinkedIn, and I'm under Chef Maria Kemp. And I would love to connect with you and tell you more about these interactive dessert presentation. The title I'm still running with right now because I do like it, is DEI&B Powered by Dessert. Kind of had a little automotive theme for BMW, but I like it. I think I'm going to stick with that title for a while.
Well, Chef, congratulations on all the success and the momentum. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on GWBC Open for Business.